You should be grateful I'm not calling the police to have you arrested for dirtying this dress. The black flight attendant bent down to pick up the broken glass, lying in the middle of the first-class aisle, where the cream leather seats had been cleaned so thoroughly they reflected the cabin's overhead lighting. The air was still heavy with the scent of vanilla wax mixed with orange essential oil, luxurious, emotionless, and absolutely cold. As she knelt down, a sharp female voice rang out, accompanied by a faint giggle from seat 3A. "Oh no, Mom, my Versace dress has orange juice on it. Maybe I need to be compensated, with someone's life, perhaps." The middle-aged woman next to her, platinum blonde hair, styled as if she just left the salon, didn't answer immediately. She took a sip of champagne, glanced over the gleaming silver food tray, then looked straight at Rosa, the waitress kneeling in front of her, with an expression as if she was checking for stains on her shoes. "Girl, do you know that dress costs more than your entire annual salary? I'm sorry, but the orange juice really just spilled from the passenger's table." Her sentence wasn't finished before a crumpled napkin flew straight into her forehead. "You should be grateful I'm not calling the police to have you arrested for dirtying this dress." The whole cabin fell silent. A man in the back row wearing a black hoodie and reading glasses, holding a Wall Street Journal, quietly folded his paper. No one noticed, but Rosa saw the way his hand froze midair, as if he'd just smelled something off. Up front, the co-pilot was looking through the cabin mirror. The other flight attendant hesitated, about to step forward, but was immediately warned off by a glance from the supervisor, a white man in a uniform suit. Rosa bowed her head, hands still in the kneeling position. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Even though the cabin was kept at a steady 21 degrees Celsius, her left thumb twitched, a habit she'd never been able to control whenever she had to endure humiliation. I'll bring a wet towel to clean it right away. I'm sorry, Meronomies, worrying. Good running watchum. And remember, on a plane for people with money, service staff should know when to keep their mouths shut." The words were spoken slowly, each one emphasized, clearly intended for the other passengers to hear as well. A young man in a black suit at seat 4C sneered, lifted his phone as if to photograph the food, but his camera lens was clearly pointed at her. As Rosa stood up, her legs were numb, as if she'd been sitting for hours on ice. But she kept her head down, turned lightly, and stepped backward to her assigned spot. The stainless steel tray in her hand trembled slightly, letting out a cold, faint clink. No one said anything else. There was only the steady hum of the engines and the pale LED light illuminating the orange stain spreading lightly across the passenger's dress. A pale mark lighter than the self-respect being pushed down with every passing second. The flight had 43 minutes left before landing. But Rosa knew today was not like any other, because in the last row, the man who had folded his newspaper had changed his posture. He was watching not as a passenger, and his gaze, it wasn't judging the food. But today, a rule will be broken, and this airline will never be the same again. The soft yellow cabin light slid along the length of the plane, casting Rosa's silhouette onto the wall like a nameless, slender shadow. She had just finished setting down the drink tray when a sharp snap rang out. A martini glass slipped from the young passenger's hand in seat 3A, spilling all over the light suede cushion. "Oops," she raised an eyebrow. "My freshly done nails are just too slippery." The glass hadn't even hit the floor before the liquid soaked the white dress the girl was wearing, then spread across the seat. Not a blink of regret, not a word of apology. Only the sound of chewing gum and a cold, empty stare. "Get someone to clean this up. This spot isn't fancy anymore." The girl looked at Rosa as if she were a broken prop ruining an Instagram performance. Rosa barely had time to react when Mr. Dalton's voice, her direct supervisor, called out sharply from the galley in the back. "Rosa, use the specialized towels. And remember to apologize to the guests for the inconvenience." Rosa stood still, said nothing. She bit her lower lip to keep her voice from shaking. Her hand brushed the pocket of her apron, where she always kept a few disinfectant wipes. Yes, I'm sorry for the inconvenience." Her latex-gloved hands began to wipe every spot on the seat, the cushion, even the designer handbag the passenger had left sprawled in the aisle. The smell of alcohol and perfume mixed into something unpleasant, sharp, overwhelming, and foreign. Another attendant, Casey, the white girl passed by, smirking slightly. You'd better get used to cleaning around here. No one's going to stick up for you. She didn't say it loud, but loud enough for Rosa to hear. And the cabin supervisor's look gave a silent nod of agreement. No one defended her. No one looked at her as a human being. Just like part of the floor supposed to be clean, quiet, and leave no trace. Outside the window, clouds were thin as paper. Inside the cabin, Rosa kept her head down, cleaning the seat like she was wiping shame from her own dignity. But no one saw her left hand had started to clench into a fist. See, Urim. Just as Rosa was putting the tray of disinfectant towels back into the galley, the restroom door swung open. The man who'd been with the girl earlier, tall, wearing a white silk shirt, stepped out, stared down at the floor in front of his seat, then frowned. The seat's dirty. Did someone spill something? Without waiting for an answer, he lifted his left foot and pressed the toe of his shoe hard into the base of the seat, enough to leave a full print of the red mud still clinging from the restroom floor onto the carpet. A faint squeak as rubber slid against the fabric. He turned back to Rosa. Clean it. I can't sit like this. And I'm not going back to the rear cabin. Again, the cabin went silent. Casey, still standing nearby, bent down as if to help, but Rosa saw her hand only touched. The re-inonance. The air. Then she stepped back. I'm sorry, let me take care of this, Rosa meant to say, but her phone in her uniform pocket buzzed. She asked permission to check it just 2 seconds. The screen flashed, Jalen little brother. A message popped up. I got suspended. They called you maid in front of me. I couldn't take it. Fought them. Rosa blinked twice. Her heart thumped fast, not because of the dirty shoes, but because her brother, the boy who'd promised never to fight again, had kept his word. Until today. She put the phone back, knelt down, and started scrubbing the carpet in circles. The passenger's shoes stayed right by her cheek. The smell of sweat from the expensive leather mixed with lingering ammonia from the cleaning fluid. Her fingers curled from the cold. Her back was wet with sweat, but her lips stayed tightly closed, no words. No one knew, in Rosa's head, a thought had just echoed not from her brother, but from somewhere deeper. I'm not a doormat. I'm just waiting for the right person to see that. The cleaning cloth was still in Rosa's hand when her phone vibrated for the second time in her left chest pocket. It wasn't Jalen. It was the hospital. The screen displayed Dr. Harlan's name. Even as the cabin lights dimmed for descent, that name glowed like a warning cold. Sterile, and offering no room to breathe. She stepped back into the galley, asking for permission with her eyes. No one responded, but she still answered the call, her right hand already sweating, the reflex of someone who's just touched bad news with no right to refuse. Yes, I'm a family member. How's my mother? Her voice went hoarse before she finished the sentence. The doctor delivered the news in a deep, steady tone, like the cabin's ventilation. Her mother had suffered shortness of breath, was taken to the city hospital. Not critical, but she needed to be admitted for 24 hours of monitoring. However, the insurance was temporarily suspended because last year's premium hadn't been paid. The last sentence hit like a twist, not piercing her, but drilling deep into her stomach where she had no guard. She thanked him mechanically, hung up slowly as if hoping someone on the other end would hold her back. No one did. When she returned to the cabin, the first eyes she met were Dalton's, a warning frown disguised under politeness. Rosa, get back to your duties. No one here waits for anyone. His voice wasn't loud, but just sharp enough to touch every guest. Discreet and effective, like the reminders of someone who can adjust the very air in the room. She didn't reply. She just walked slowly toward the drink tray, set 2 cups of tea down. Her left hand reached for a napkin, not to wipe, but as if to keep something from falling apart. But at that moment, in row 2C, the male passenger, white shirt, gold watch, suddenly tipped his cup, letting hot coffee spill across the table, drip into the seat, and then to the floor. He didn't pretend. His voice, flat and cold, rang out the seat's dirty. You know what to do. Rosa was just a few steps away. The carpet beneath her feet had started to soak up the liquid. The scent of dark roast coffee rose, slightly burnt, sliding down her throat like unfiltered smoke. Dalton didn't ask why. He just said, "Clean it, and don't make the guest remind you twice." She knelt down, didn't argue, but this time, the passenger didn't move his foot to give her space. He pulled his leg up, stomped his shoe on the edge of the carpet, the toe arching up in front of her face like punctuation. "Use your hand. I don't like anyone pretending to be professional." Rosa's fingers tightened in her glove. Then she took it off, cleaned with her bare hand. The warm coffee soaked her palm, half burning, half cold. It felt like touching something that should have been cleaned by someone else. Someone fairer. The cabin air grew thicker, quieter, but the click of a phone camera still sounded from somewhere. A boy in the row behind was pretending to snap food pics, but his lens was pointed straight at Rosa kneeling. He smiled. Not malicious, just the smile of someone who's never had their face pressed to the floor. She stood up, slowly, hands still damp. No one said a word. Not a single guest looked up from their device. Except for one. Back row, where the lights barely reached, the man in the black hoodie calmly folded his newspaper. Nothing about his gesture was remarkable, but his eyes were, for the first time during the whole flight, he looked directly at Rosa. Not judging, not pitying, not encouraging, as if confirming something he already knew. Rosa didn't smile, but she stood a little straighter. Not because she realized someone had seen her, but because, for the first time in 3 years, she didn't need to look down and wonder if she was in the right place. And right then, a quiet cough came from beside that man. Another passenger, an older woman in a gray suit, turned and said, not loud, but clear enough, "Maybe someone should ask again. Who's really out of place here?" No one answered. But this time, the silence that followed it wasn't neglect. It was the echo of something said just when everyone was too tired to pretend they hadn't heard. As the plane descended, Rosa closed her eyes for a second. The wheels started to scrape the runway. But in her mind, it wasn't the sound of rubber rolling. It was another sound, deeper, older, engraved into her nerves, the drag of a mop hitting the edge of the airport's tiled floor. Drag, thump, drag, thump. Each beat as steady as an hourglass, emptying slowly across the white tiles. 10 years ago, suburban Sanctuary, Lewis Airport. Rosa stood pressed against a newsstand, holding an old backpack with frayed straps. Sneakers faded in color with scuffed tongues. In front of her was a woman in a silver-gray uniform, back bent, one hand pulling the mop, the other holding a spray bottle. Her hair was tied up in a hurry, silver strands falling messily under the brim of her cap. She didn't know her daughter was standing behind her. Little Rosa didn't look at her mother's face. She looked down at the floor, at the long, thin, withered shadow of the woman kneeling to scrub a coffee stain near the boarding counter. Everyone walking by wore suits, rolling wheeled luggage. No one looked down. Some passed so close that drops from the wet rag splashed onto their pant cuffs, but not a single glance shifted direction. The boarding announcement blared like a fire alarm in the cold air, but her mother kept her head down, never looked up. Rosa stood there, unmoving. A security guard walked by, saw the girl, started to ask something. But when he followed her gaze and saw the woman cleaning the floor, he just gave a small nod and walked on. No one stopped her from standing there. But no one let her get closer, either. She still remembered it clearly, early winter, wind sweeping through the just-opened automatic doors, carrying the scent of dried sweat, floor cleaner, and the damp fabric of coats coming in. That smell stuck to her skin the whole afternoon. Her mother had just stood up when an elderly passenger spilled a cup of hot coffee. She rushed back to kneel and clean, water spilling, soaking her knees. The man said nothing. He simply stepped back. But his glance flicked to Rosa, a short look, but enough for her to know he saw her, saw the woman cleaning, and chose to do nothing. Rosa didn't remember how many steps she took toward her mother. She only knew that when she placed her hand on her mother's shoulder, the uniform was cold and wet, like an unwrung sponge. Her mother's hand jerked, the reflex of someone touched in a place where no one ever touches. But when she turned around, her face softened instantly, though her cheeks flushed red from the heat of the floor and the lingering coffee in her hand. "You got here earlier than I thought," her mother said, quickly standing up. hiding the cleaning rag behind her back as if it were contraband. "It's okay. I was just watching," Rosa replied quietly. But her voice then wasn't to reassure her mother. It was to understand for herself why she found it so hard to breathe standing there. Her mother bent over, grabbed the spray bottle and said, without looking directly at her, "You're standing too close to the passengers. They don't like it." Rosa didn't move. She lifted her head, looking at the row of boarding gates where sunlight streamed through the glass roof, shining across the floor like inverted crosses. She didn't believe in God, but right then, the light made her eyes blur. "Mom," she said, for the first time without trying to hold back, "someday I won't let anyone call you a cleaning lady." Her mother froze. For a split second, she was about to scold like every time Rosa said something out of bounds. But the look in that child's eyes wouldn't let her turn away. Rosa still remembered her mother's hand then resting on her head, trembling lightly, then squeezing gently. "No one calls me that," her mother said. "Only people who don't know how to see that." That sentence wasn't enough to erase the image of the thin shadow cast on the tile. But it was enough for Rosa to keep as she grew up as silent proof that sometimes being seen isn't a curse. It's the beginning of being acknowledged. On today's flight, Rosa had knelt, had cleaned, had listened. But not once did she feel she'd become what her mother always feared most: invisible. And that's why, when Raphael Monroe handed her that business card, she didn't think about opportunity. She thought about her mother. A click sounded, the seatbelt locked in place. Rosa opened her eyes. The cabin lights were no longer warm. A pale blue-white spread quietly across the cabin, making everyone's skin look washed out, as if filtered through a protective shield. It felt like the whole cabin had stopped breathing, not because of pressure, but because everyone was waiting for something unannounced over the PA. The plane's wheels pressed softly onto the runway. The cabin tilted a little, then leveled out. But Rosa's body did not. She felt every muscle in her chest both retreat and tense, as if ready to absorb an impact that wasn't physical. The captain said something over the speakers, the usual greeting, but no one really listened. In the cabin, everything was like a perfectly rehearsed performance of organized silence. Passengers fastened seatbelts, lifted laptops, adjusted their hair. Dalton sat still, hands clasped in front of his stomach, eyes fixed ahead, looking at no one, not even Rosa. When the buckle-up sign turned off, Rosa didn't stand up right away. She took the black business card from her chest pocket, turned it over still blank. No note, no special mark. But the surface of the card felt slightly rough, as if someone had held it too long before making a decision. She put the card away. Suriname stood up, smoothed her uniform skirt, stepped into the main cabin. Everyone had started searching through their bags. Rosa didn't rush. She simply walked down the aisle, every step feeling like she was stepping on an electrified rail. The closer she got to the aircraft door, the colder the air became, the dry chill of jet engines outside mixed with the exhaust of luggage carts. But colder than all was the gaze of Raphael Monroe, standing at the door, no longer in a hoodie, no longer passive. He was wearing a long, charcoal gray trench coat, standing tall, hands in his pockets. And most importantly, he was standing between two ground staff in Navy suits, each wearing an airline name badge with a distinctive red stripe. That stripe was reserved for Aegis management attending internal events. Rosa approached, saying nothing. Raphael just nodded slightly. A silent greeting. Behind him was a dark SUV, and a line of passengers beginning to leave the cabin one by one, unhurried. Dalton was third out. When he saw Raphael standing there, he paused for half a step, just enough for his shoe to stop at the edge of the red carpet that had just been rolled out. But Raphael didn't look at him. Not for a second. He was still looking at Rosa, as if everything he was about to do had already been decided by the way she walked out the door. The sound of luggage wheels rolling on concrete echoed like metal grinding on stone cold, steady and dense. Rosa walked beside Raphael, neither of them speaking. A black SUV opened its front door, but he didn't gesture for her to get in. Instead, he led her along a side passage to the right of the terminal, where a makeshift sign read, Aegis Charter, Strategic Team Launch. Under the sign, A few staff in suits were setting up a backdrop, attaching lights, testing microphones. Behind them was a small space with a podium, a reception table, tall chairs, and two cameras set up at diagonal corners. There was no big audience, but there were cameras. The chief operating officer was there. So was the company's communications head. Rosa recognized her from online training sessions she'd secretly watched on someone else's login. Raphael stopped in front of the stage, turned to her. Just a few minutes. I'll mention you as the silent symbol of this flight. Rosa nodded. Her heart wasn't racing, but her hands trembled a bit. She took a cup of water from a staff member, drank a sip. Her mouth tasted metallic, though the water was clear. A woman walked over the internal manager, handing Rosa a temporary name badge, Rosa M. Name. ISO, passenger support. She took it, pinned it to her shirt, over her left chest. Still the same spot. The mic turned on. Raphael stepped up to the podium. His voice was deep, steady, familiar. Today, I am very proud to announce a new direction for Aegis Charter, based on the principle strength does not come from a roster, but from how we treat the nameless. The whole stage was silent, as if even the concrete floor was listening. And on the last flight, I saw clearly not everyone knows how to treat others. As soon as he finished that sentence, a quiet cough sounded at the back of the space. A man in a black suit, silk purple tie, stepped out from the edge of the stage. It was Dalton, non-Henonen, Denon. Both Rosa and Raphael turned at the same time. Dalton smiled, but his eyes did not. He carried a thin envelope, handing it directly to an assistant standing near a camera. The gesture was quick, precise, as if rehearsed. The assistant opened it, face changing. Raphael stepped down from the podium, heading straight over. But Dalton had already stepped up, grabbing the secondary mic. Sorry, I wouldn't interrupt unless this concerned the company's integrity. He turned to Rosa. This girl about to be honored has a younger brother recently suspended for school violence, a mother owing hospital bills, and she herself was once reprimanded internally for noncompliance. File is here. His voice rang out clear, precise, and delivered like a boardroom speech. No one spoke. The cameras kept rolling. The light still shone on Rosa's cheeks, now beginning to pale. Raphael didn't stop him, not because he didn't want to, but because he was observing. Dalton continued, turning to the audience, I'm not against opportunity, but if Aegis wants a symbol, I hope it's someone who represents discipline, not sentiment. Rosa heard every word like a slow tapping on glass, not shattering, but spreading cracks. Mother owing hospital bills. Brother suspended, once reprimanded internally. Each phrase like a layer of light stripped from her skin. In her mind, whispers began to rise, not from the audience, but from airline staff near the cameras. Who is she? Anyway. Wait, wasn't this supposed to be an award? Rosa's hand slipped slightly on the podium. She didn't fall. But her heart started missing beats, the kind you don't get back on rhythm. Her throat burned as if she'd just swallowed sharp mouthwash, but she couldn't cough, couldn't swallow. The main camera's light shifted, pointing straight at her face, casting a shadow from her hair across her cheek like a half-removed mask. Raphael took a step forward, but didn't intervene. He just placed his hands behind his back, eyes unblinking, as if weighing something more important than Dalton's words. And right in that gap, Rosa clearly heard the mic click, not from the stage, but from her own chest. One deep breath held ready to break out. She didn't think of the business card, didn't think of the training program, didn't think about getting promoted or fired. She thought of one simple, raw, burning truth. If she didn't speak now, she'd spend her life being known as the girl who was spared, not the girl who chose to stand tall. Rosa didn't step forward. She didn't step back either. Her feet seemed rooted to the concrete under the stage, not nailed down, but choosing to stay, right between the glaring lights and the stairs growing sharper every second. Dalton kept talking, still in that smooth, expensive voice of a white man in a suit who knows exactly which lines will be quoted in tomorrow's news. We're not against hope, he said, but feelings are not a hiring standard. And I believe anyone representing this brand should start with proper discipline. Rosa raised her head. No one handed her the mic. She reached for it herself, and no one stopped her. I was once reprimanded internally, she said, voice not loud. But the mic picked it up clearly, with no noise, no interference. I was reprimanded for refusing to serve a drunk passenger who touched my back 3 times during a night flight when no one was looking. The whole stage fell silent. Dalton froze just slightly. But he did. She didn't look at him. Didn't need to, no. And yes, my brother got into a fight at school because his classmates called me maid with a tray. No one asked why. No one asked who started it. But my brother was suspended. The one who mocked me, nothing happened. The camera zoomed in on her face. Someone whispered backstage, should we cut the feed? Another replied, we're live. Rosa took a breath. I don't want to stand here saying this. I'm not asking for anything. I just want to do my job. But if doing this job means pretending to be someone else, I refuse. A ripple of whispers spread through the staff in the wings. The communications team stood still, not pressing anything. Raphael turned to the camera crew. Calmly but clear, keep rolling. Dalton stepped forward, trying to regain ground. You're using personal feelings to distract from work. We need people who can stay disciplined. Rosa looked straight at him. I do stay disciplined. Every time I pick up a broken glass, every time I apologize for something I didn't cause, every step I take under looks like yours. The only thing is discipline doesn't mean switching myself off. A click sounded the mic from Raphael's side. He stepped onto the stage. Didn't look at Dalton. Didn't need to anymore. Thank you, Manager Dalton, for saving us time on the internal review. Raphael's voice was steady, almost cold. I am Raphael Monroe. I am not a consultant. Everyone looked up. They had guessed, but no one thought he would say it himself. I own 47% of Aegis Charter's executive shares. And from today, I officially take over senior HR oversight, including reviewing hiring practices and guest feedback. Dalton opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His throat was dry, and now the lights were no longer shining on Rosa. They were landing straight on his forehead. Raphael looked at Rosa. You can choose to leave or stay. But if you stay, I want you to help me rebuild what he taught the whole cabin to forget dignity. She didn't answer, but her feet didn't move. And her eyes, for the first time during the entire event, began to glisten. Dalton didn't step back completely, but he stood awkwardly, his right shoulder low, tie skewed to one side, and sweat beginning to bead on his forehead, even though the stage fan kept blowing steadily. The cameras stayed on. The light kept shining straight into his face, not the warm light for an interviewee, but a white, sharp light, the kind used to analyze expressions. Raphael didn't need to say more. He simply turned slightly, signaling to the communications assistant. The assistant nodded. 1 click. A short clip from the flight's internal security camera began playing on a makeshift side screen. No commentary, no effects. Just footage Dalton standing in the back galley, arms crossed, watching as Rosa cleaned the coffee spill the passenger had made on purpose. A shot of a passenger filming Rosa kneeling on the carpet. A brief clip of Casey, the white attendant, stepping back when she saw Rosa being told to clean shoes. No one spoke, until a female logistics staff member, hair in a high ponytail, badge reading flight support, pulled out her phone. Not to take a picture, she started recording video from the side of the stage, panning straight onto Dalton's face. She didn't try to hide it. Someone else started a TikTok live stream. Short caption. This the manager who let them humiliate her. Aegis press conference right now. Watch it, dude. A small crowd began to gather outside the stage area. Behind the security barrier, phones raised, eyes locked on the main screen. Dalton opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His hand waved slightly, signaling to an assistant. The assistant stepped back, avoiding his gaze. A voice from the audience rang out, not loud, but clear. 3 years ago, you told me, never let feelings affect your decisions. Now I get it, it wasn't advice. It was a warning. It was Ethan Dalton's former staff, once reassigned from flight operations for being indecisive. Today, he wore the Aegis security uniform, but no gloves. Dalton turned to Raphael. For the first time, he was speechless. His eyes darted, hand reached to adjust his glasses, then dropped. No one handed him a mic. Raphael said, simply, "We don't punish people, but when a system is wrong, it must be dismantled." Dalton stood still, but it was the stillness of someone who didn't know which way to leave. One of the two stage staff glanced at the other, then stepped forward and gently unclipped the mic from his lapel. No one needed to ask permission, and he didn't react. Rosa didn't move, but the camera caught her expression, not satisfied, not trembling, not proud. Just a clear, steady silence that made any defense unnecessary. A backstage worker, someone who had served with Dalton 4 years ago, turned to Raphael. "He still has authority to sign off on internal finances today." Raphael didn't answer, but his eyes flicked down to the list held by the secretary, crossing off a line. A phone notification sounded. Live viewers too. Part of the TikTok stream was now showing up on Reddit, captioned, "The manager who froze when truth spoke." The secondary light started to fade in the center of the stage. Only one spotlight remained shining straight down on Dalton. His eyes began darting everywhere. Sweat soaked his forehead. A heavy breath hit the mic, making the speakers vibrate. The live streamer whispered, "He's gonna faint." And then no one gave the order. But the whole row of people behind Rosa shifted aside, creating a corridor, like an aisle between two rows of seats leading nowhere. But as if waiting for someone to walk out, Dalton looked at that empty space, looked at Rosa, looked at Raphael. Then he walked down, didn't bow his head, but didn't hold it high either. His hand still buttoned his jacket as if holding on to image. But every step landing on the carpet sounded as if everyone could hear the lining slip off his dignity. The door opened. He disappeared behind the curtain. No one saw him off. No one clapped. No one stopped him. 3 weeks later, Gate D5 at Atlanta International Airport had been remodeled into an internal staff reception area. Off-white signs with the new Aegis Charter logo, smaller, more streamlined, were placed on every cabin, with the slogan italicized just below. "Respect is not a reward. It's the uniform." No one made a speech about it. There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony. But every employee received an email from the system. From today, all support staff name tags will be reprinted. The level section will be replaced with legacy role. No more ranks. Only reasons for existence. In the first week's internal meeting, Rosa didn't sit at the front table. She stood by the whiteboard, pen in hand, recording feedback. But every time she spoke, the room went completely silent. Not because anyone demanded it, but because everyone wanted to hear from the only person who had stood tall in the storm without shouting. Her job title in the system was Cultural Behavior Trainer, Flight Dignity Program. No private office, no special nameplate. But Raphael had once said to her before she started, "We don't need more people at the top. We need someone calm enough to stand among others without putting anyone down." Each week, Rosa met a new group of employees. No technical training, no lessons on how to say thank you in the right tone. She started the first session with just one question. "When was the last time you felt seen?" No one answered quickly, but no one laughed. A male technician, big build, shiny shaved head, raised his hand after almost a minute of silence. It was when you asked this question. No applause in the room, but their eyes changed. Hall E, the old lounge area, had been converted into the airline's soft skills training center. No conference table, no projector, just white walls, folding chairs, and a row of nameplates hanging vertically, each with a small line of lettering underneath, etched in matte steel. Once invisible, now indispensable. The first nameplate belonged to a doorman, the second to a cleaning staff member, the third Lorraine M. Meharardin M. And with a note taught us that bowing your head doesn't mean lowering yourself. Rosa brought her mother the day they hung the nameplates. Her mother wore a pale pink cardigan, hands still trembling but eyes steady, the eyes of someone who once thought she'd never be named in any system, except the shift roster. Jalen was there too, not in a school uniform, but in a Navy flight school shirt, with the Aegis Pilot Academy logo, the first scholarship from the Dignity Legacy program. When the nameplates were up, there was no music, no flowers, just a long line of people, each stepping forward to touch the plate and nod. Some had tears, some just stood still, but no one turned away early. Rosa stood in the back, didn't speak. A young manager came over and whispered, "Aren't you going to say something?" She shook her head. "I've already said what needed to be said with things you can't record." The ceiling lights reflected off the metal nameplates, casting small, overlapping patches of light on the wall, glittering. For a moment, that tiny plate shone brighter than the company logo. Not because of its size, but because someone once saw it from the floor. Some people's lives change because of a single opportunity. Not Rosa. Her life changed because someone saw her at the very moment the whole world turned away. She's not a CEO, not a genius. She's just someone who refused to let others define her worth through silence. But sometimes, all it takes is one look, one person brave enough to stand on the right side for an entire family to step out of the place society tried to keep them in forever. Now her mother has a nameplate. Her brother wears a pilot's shirt. And Rosa herself teaches respect by living it, not just saying it. That's a changed life. Not by luck, but by courage. What about you? Do you have the courage to stand on the right side even when no one applauds? Or will you choose silence and watch a chance at a new life pass you by? Stay until the end. The twist will redefine what redemption truly means. If you witnessed injustice like this, would you stay silent or take action? Tell us below. Subscribe to Unveiled Wealth, where kindness sparks redemption and silence breaks power.